All right. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight, and I'd like to call this meeting to order and welcome you all to the Coeur d'Alene School District 271 Public Budget Hearing and regular board meeting of June 12th, 2023. Will everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to introduce our participants for this evening. Starting at my far right is Ms. Mary Ann Southwick, Clerk of the Board, Dr. Sean Hawker, Superintendent. To my left is Mr. Casey Morrisroe, Vice Chair, Ms. Leslie Bierke, Board Member, Ms. Heather Tenbrink, Board Member, Ms. Allie Anderton will be joining us shortly, also a Board Member, and I'm Rebecca Smith, Board Chair. Public comment related to the 2023-24 budget will take place after the budget presentation. Public comment on district-related items is scheduled to start near the start of the regular meeting. Please sign in for each comment period on the two different sheets provided at the entrance door, and comments may also be submitted to the board via email at trustees@cdaschools.org or in writing through the clerk. Thank you. We have an agenda tonight, and I believe Trustee Morrisroe is going to make a suggestion.
Yeah, Chair Smith, I'd like to ask that we amend the agenda to remove item 13, which was a action item on the superintendent contract after executive session. I believe it won't be necessary tonight, so.
Yeah. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor of that
Amendment.
amendment? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right. Is there a motion then for the amended agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the amended agenda.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We'll move forward with our agenda then. We will now begin the public budget hearing. And so Shannon, I'd like to welcome you up.
Alrighty, good evening. It's a big night for the finance department. So tonight we are presenting our proposed FY24 budget for next year. So included on board docs is the big budget, the 100-page document. This will be a nice summary for it, and hopefully we'll be able to provide a couple tips and tricks to review that budget as well. So before we get started, kind of want to do a couple thank yous and shout outs. With us here tonight is our lovely accounting manager, Mallory Threet in the blue. She was instrumental with the budget development. It was her first year with the budget, and she spent countless hours diving in. Couldn't have done it without her. And then also a shout out to Mr. Eric Davis. He is a huge part of developing the budget. 87% of our budget is staffing, so he worked countless hours with finance developing a great budget for next year. Okay, so on the agenda, we're just going to take a look back of where we were a year ago. Then we're going to dive into analyzing our general fund, looking at all other funds, and then next steps for the budget. All right, so about a year ago, we had our public hearing for our FY23 budget, and we had some goals and some stakeholder concerns going into FY23. First was salaries and competitive wages. We had tons of vacancies. We weren't really competing with teacher salaries and classified salaries with private industry as well as other school districts, especially Washington. We also had a big concern of deferred maintenance, that big deferred maintenance without an ongoing revenue stream. This was before we even did the SPFL in the August election. And then, of course, inflation and rising costs was another big concern. So that's where we were about a year ago. So diving in, I first kind of want to show When you are in that big 100-page budget document, on page 6, there's going to be a summary. It is an entire financial summary of both our general fund and all other funds. So what we're going to do first, we're going to review, the first column is our general fund. So when we're looking at that summary, we've got beginning balances right here, revenues, salaries, and our ending fund balance. The second column shows our all other funds that we're going to dive into as well. That's 33 additional funds that have restricted local, state, and federal revenues tied to it. We got a lot of questions during our levy election, so we're going to spend a little bit of time tonight making it more understandable of how to read that big lump sum of all others. All right, so for general fund revenues for FY24, this is what a revenue summary looks like in your budget packet. Not very user-friendly, but when you are going and reviewing the budget, what is important is, so each fund has its own detail of revenues and expenditures, and that starts on page 8. You'll know the first page of each fund will be revenues, and the second and third page will be expenditures. To know its revenues, you'll see a revenues title. On the top right, you'll see what fund you're reviewing. And this will be, so each highlight will be each revenue category. You have to add up this portion and this portion to get the total. So some revenues are kind of condensed on one page. But here's a nice summary of our general fund revenues, our proposed for FY24, and taking a look at a comparison from adopted 2022-23. You'll note that our overall increase in revenue was about $10.5 million, 5.3 coming from local revenue, aka the majority is that our levy. So we increased our levy from 20 to 25 million, and it passed just recently last month. And then we have 5.3 million in state revenue. Here's just an illustration. State revenue is the majority of our general fund operating budget at 74%. And then local revenue, aka our levy, and some other small revenue, local revenue funds are coming around 26% for next year. Because state revenues is such a huge portion of our budget, and it comes with some complicated funding formulas, we're going to take a look at that. So we got $5.3 million in new state funding, and that mainly was from our big base support program plus benefit. So we'll go into that funding formula. And just this big portion of the pie is the base support program, and then we always have to add our benefit apportionment along with that. So it's that big funding portion from the state is 70% of our general fund. And within it, it consists of two funding formulas, our salary-based apportionment and then our discretionary funding. And what drives both of those funding formulas are what are known as support units. And you'll see that we always kind of present this graphic to show how support units are calculated. We take average daily attendance divided by a state-determined divisor based on grade level. So the state has in statute these divisors. They're different depending on the grade level. And then that's how a support unit is calculated. ADA divided by that divisor. To very simple terms, we can consider it almost the size of a classroom. Of course, that's a little simplified, knowing that for kinder, they're still only funding full day K out of the base support or half day K out of the base support. So you'll see the divisor is at 40. Okay, so what we have here is a summary of what our support units were at last year's adopted budget, so ending this current year, FY23. What we actually got on our February 15th payment for 2023, and the support units that drive the proposed budget. So a big thing happened this year. We are going back to average daily attendance. When COVID happened, we had temporary rulings that we would be funded off of enrollment. Knowing that, you'll see that our support units are decreasing by a huge amount because we're going back to attendance. In a typical year, we would be eligible for protection if our support units for the current year were significantly lower than the prior year. We would be protected at 97%. So if you see our FY23 support units were 507, and 97% of that would be 492. So still a decrease, but better than 477. But every state is going to be experiencing the significant loss. So really, every district is going to experience this loss. With protection, it's pretty much like a self-insurance fund for districts. So districts would have to pay for covering that cost to protect those support units. Everyone's experiencing that huge loss, so the cost of protection goes up. There's not enough in that fund to be able to cover at least our district by 14 support units in other districts. So the cost is an additional 3% to our district, meaning about 15 support units. So it drops to 477.41. So protection does not benefit us for next year. It's a one-time kind of scenario because ADA is here to stay. It's in legislation until they change it. So that's when we're talking about, you'll hear that a lot at the state level, that the cost of protection is so much and we don't benefit from that. So now that we know our support units are 477.41, that is used as a factor in our funding formulas. Our big, more complicated funding formula, salary-based apportionment, really, we need our support units first, and the state tells us how many positions they'll fund based off of that support unit amount. And the second factor after our support units is our average salaries the state funds. So for certified, for our teachers and our pupil services like counselors, they put our teachers on their career ladder salary schedule, which is very different than our salary schedule, to determine an average salary. For classified staff, they give a set amount for 1 FTE. And then for administrative staff, they give a set amount, and then we times it by our administrative experience factor. So for FY24, there was a big increase in teachers and certified staff at the state level, a 6,359 increase to their career ladder. For classified, there was almost a $14,000 increase to that amount they fund. And then for admin, they increased that base salary they fund by 4%. And then also, the state funds the PERSI and FICA Medicare portion of that amount. So I wish I could zoom in, but this summary is a more simplified version of the salary-based apportionment formula. We're take a look at FY23 versus FY24. The big things to know is that the state, based off of our 507 support units in FY23, funded us 786 staff. Now that we're going back to attendance, they're going to fund us only 740. So 57 staff less they're funding us. That's the downside. The flip side, though, the positive is they increased those average salaries by a good amount. So our average salary goes up. Just taking a look at teacher salary, our average salary for the SBA, the salary-based apportionment, last year was $51,000. This year, it's going to be $57,500. Just to give you an idea, though, our average district salary is $63,000 right now. So the average salary they fund is still less than our actual salary from our salary schedules. That gives us a total of $4.2 million more for the salary-based apportionment for next year. Diving a little more into FTE because really the big topic was the governor gave us $6,000 increases for all teachers. Well, that's not true. He gave us $6,000 increases for the state allowance. So 487 plus 38. We actually have more teachers in our general fund than what the state gives us an allowance. And we also have teachers in our state and federal all other funds. So in total, we have 163, almost 164 FTE. So for classified, one FTE is pretty much one teacher on a full contract. For classified, one FTE is a full 12-month employee working a 40-hour work week, so 2,080 hours. So if there's part-time people, they are less than one FTE. So I think you've heard that we have about 1,400 employees. That's true, but for FTE, it's going to be lower because a lot of our classified staff don't equal one FTE. So our staff allowance was 740. That means we had to come up with, the state did not fund us salary increases for this many people. So that's where our levy dollars showed up. And we were able to give those $6,000 increases, and we were able to increase classified staff by $12.75 to $16 because of the levy, because the state did not give us enough to fund all our FTE. So that's been a challenge with a lot of other districts. They were not fortunate enough to have those increase in levy dollars. So I think if you follow Idaho Ed News with the CDA Press, Kellogg issued an article. That's kind of what that means in a very funding formula driven way of saying it. All right, the easy part, the second funding formula from our base support program is called discretionary. What we do is we take our support units the best 28 weeks, so they're always a little lower than our support units that drive our salary-based apportionment, times an amount that the state gives us. The state increased both our health discretionary apportionment, which is funding to pay for health insurance, and they also increased discretionary other, which it's the board's discretion to use that funding at the local level. So that was a $1.2 million increase. To give an idea, one support unit for FY24 equals about $142,000. So definitely, I think last year was about a little more than $120,000. So definitely an increase in what one support unit equals in revenue for our district. And just kind of wanted to highlight another impact of enrollment to ADA is at the state level. They said they based the increase in K-12 funding. They said they were giving out $330 million for next year. That was based off of their calculation of enrollment support units. So they were creating all the district budgets, all the district allocations based off of the districts having enrollment-based funding. Now that we're going back to ADA, that means that that $330 million goes down. They're only giving us money now for average daily attendance support units, meaning that they'll probably estimate only give out $215 million, leaving $115 million on the table. So we'll wait and hear if they'll be distributing that to districts in some way. Okay, so now we're going to go into expenditures. So we had $10.5 million in revenues. So we'll see what we did with expenditures. Now here is that budget detail from the budget packet, not very user-friendly. There's 2 pages to expenditures, and they follow the revenue summary. How to read it is the second column is the proposed FY24 budget. The prior column is the comparison of the prior year. So you'll have the second column as the total, and then all the columns that follow break down salaries, benefits, purchase services, kind of all the object code categories, what we actually are spending. And then at the end of the expenditures shows ending fund balance.
Shannon, this document that's posted, and I think like a summary of this goes in the paper.
Yep.
You've referred to it as not very user-friendly. Why is that the format?
That is the state official budget template. It's for accountants. It's for, directors of finance. It's not user-friendly for a community member wanting to know more about our budget. So I'll talk about kind of what we're going to do to bridge that gap between a very complicated state budget template versus something that is still financial statements, unfortunately. So financial statements aren't fun to read, but financial statements that are a little more easy on the eyes, and that there's also a narrative to back up those financial statements so people can understand what's going on in those numbers.
And then on the left-hand side there's the codes like 512, 515.
Yep.
Those are IC codes?
Those are IC codes. Fortunately, there's
Or state codes.
State codes,
And
yep.
they tell us how expenses have to be categorized.
Yep, it's state-determined coding, and it shows the description of those codes. So what we have to report, we have to break down how much we spend on elementary instruction versus secondary versus what we pay for school administration and district administration. So there's a line item and a budget for each of those. Okay, here is a summary, though, of our general fund expenditures. Our first column shows our adopted. And this is a little different. We always have to report our prior year adopted when comparing, but I also wanted to include our working budget. We started showing the working budget throughout the year on our monthly financials. The reason being is that after adoption, salary increases were approved that don't show up in the adopted budget. There's also personnel changes around the year. We develop a budget in May, but come August and September, there's entirely new people doing different positions. So budgets have to be updated for that kind of stuff. So the second column is our working budget. Our third column is our proposed general fund. And then I wanted to show the difference in expenditures for looking from the proposed to the adopted and the proposed to the working. You see a $12.6 million increase in expenditures when we compare the proposed with the adopted. That's because the adopted doesn't include those salary increases that we did after budget adoption in June of last year. The working budget is a better reflection of the net increase in expenditures. That is about 8.9, and we'll go through what those changes represent. And just the two biggest pieces of the pie is salary and benefits. 87% of our budget are people. So that's the biggest focus. Okay, so this is a summary of all our general fund expenditure changes. And it's how we tie out and explain what happened. Right here, 12.6 million, that was the difference between our adopted versus our proposed. We take out what the increase in FY23 salary increases were, plus some updates with the working budget. That arrives at an $8.9 million difference that we need to explain why our expenditures increased by that amount. So first, we'll focus on salary and benefit changes. Before we go into additions, there are actually some reductions going into FY24. We have right-sized 24 teaching positions. In the next slide, I'll explain what right-sizing means and the process that we go through when we do that. For the additions, we have all of those salary increases that were board approved on May 30th, plus 11 additional safety and security personnel that was part of the $25 million levy. Then we have non-payroll changes. Some of them are out of our control, and some of them we are recommending for approval. Our property and liability insurance has increased significantly, mainly due to assessed property value, and the big fire at in the Pocatello High School had a huge impact on our insurance fund. Medicaid match. So Medicaid match it's a requirement. If we are billing for Medicaid services and getting revenue, we have to do a general fund match to that. During COVID and for last year, the portion that we had to match, the percentage, was significantly decreased by the federal government. That has expired, and now the Medicaid match is just a little shy of 30% of Medicaid revenue. So we are expecting about 1.5 million in billing revenue. So that means a 525,000 contribution from the general fund next year. Athletic equipment is an add for next year. We've had about 300,000 in our general fund to pay for state tournament travel. However, we have not had a line item for athletic equipment for our high schools and our middle schools. They do a lot of fundraising, rely on booster donations to get a lot of their equipment. But we're identifying football helmets are a safety issue, and padding is a safety issue. If you go out and see our hurdles, they're not so great. So 115 is not a lot when you think about a $97 million general fund budget, but it's a start until we can find an ongoing revenue stream for deferred maintenance and equipment rotational needs. So each high school is going to get 50,000, and then middle schools we're going to allocate 5,000 to help with their equipment rotations. K-Tech is increasing as their operations increase and they give salary increases. Our portion, the 50% of K-Tech increases. SRO contracts are increasing with their cost of living adjustments. We increased building budget increases, so we're asking for that approval to increase, really to help them keep up with some of the inflation costs that they're experiencing. So that's for the elementary schools. And then all our department budgets. So we have department budgets for communications, the superintendents, HR, technology, assessment. They all have department budgets. The net increase, we actually were able to lower it by $5,000. So no increase to department budgets. That is going to be a concern of ours, though, if we're maintaining flat budgets and we're seeing inflation. Well, we can do less with those dollars. So overall, $700K increase to non-payroll expenditures, so adding these two up explains our general fund expenditure increase for the year.
Shannon, these are just one-time line item additions for next year.
So
Are these going to become ongoing?
the salaries are ongoing.
Well, I know that, but
Yeah.
I'm talking about the non-payroll.
Property and liability insurance is ongoing.
Okay.
Medicaid is ongoing. We want those revenues. We benefit from having those revenues, so we want to continue the match. We just get less revenues.
Yeah, I'm more focused on athletic equipment down.
We would like to keep that as ongoing because there's equipment rotations. They can't purchase all the helmets they need and all the shoulder pads they need, but they can start having a nice little rotation like we've done with bus depreciation to be able to at least replace the stuff that the conditioning says we have to take out because it's not safe for the students anymore. SRO is ongoing for those contracts. Building budget increases. If inflation reduces, we can take a look at reducing it back, but we'd like to keep it ongoing as inflation increases. And then, of course, that would be ongoing. Okay, I want to explain a little more about the payroll budget and how it was developed. There's really a two-step process. We first create the budget based off of current assignments in the springtime. We add back any open positions and vacancies that are on those job postings. And then we estimate kind of hourly pay for next year based off of the current year, any additional stipends that are paid from departments or other budgets. The second step is we then take a look at projected enrollment and align our teaching positions for each building based off of that enrollment. If we see enrollment is decreasing and we have more teaching positions, then we reduce those. Really, it's about, we have a class size goal, and then we're trying to develop a student pupil ratio goal for secondary level. And then after aligning teaching positions to what enrollment is for next year. Then we factor in if we need to hire back any retirees, resignations, and leaves of absences. For FY24, we're actually not hiring back any retirees or resignations at this time. We've experienced what is known as the ESSER cliff. So all our ESSER dollars are expiring at the end of this budget year, FY24. And really, we have been mostly using those ESSER dollars for one-time expenditures. But if you recall from a budget adoption last year and salary negotiations, we were experiencing a deficit, and we were using ESSER dollars to cover that deficit. That means there have been some ongoing expenditures covered by ESSER. Before the pandemic, our enrollment was over 11,000. Next year, we're projected at 10,090. Last year in FY23, HR did a great job at right sizing initially, so meaning aligning teaching positions with actual enrollment. And this is kind of the final step process, the last year that we need to right size a little more. So we identified 24 teaching positions that we could reduce while maintaining the class size and pupil to student or student to teacher ratio goals. And that was the reduction, the cost savings, about 1.8 million. So that money was repurposed for the raises, and then I'll show you the operating surplus that we'll be experiencing for this year as well.
Real quick on that, Shannon, on that kind of right sizing. I feel like maybe because I was part of budget subcommittee for the last, 7 or 8 years, that could use some explanation. And since you weren't here, I'm not going to ask you to do it. I'll do it. But in the, when COVID happened and we saw huge decreases in our student populations, at the time we weren't sure, okay, how much of this is because of COVID and it's because of rules. There were people who didn't like masking or they wanted more masking or all those sorts of things. And we knew if we adjusted staffing at that time and COVID rules went away, and all of a sudden 1,000 kids came back, we'd be in trouble. We wouldn't be able to rehire those staff because they'd find other jobs. So at the time, the district made the decision to use those federal monies to keep staffing levels at the current rate or at the 2019-2020 rate, even though we had reduced our student population. And we were asking a lot of our teachers at that time with Schoology and online learning, and we were bouncing around all those sorts of things. So, prior to that, we always adjusted our staffing, every year. We've always been, for the previous 10 years, we were growing for the most part, so we were adding staff. Now we've shrunk a little, so we're taking staff away. It's kind of something new for our district in a long time, but it is what it is. We know now after 3 years, some students have come back, some haven't. Some have moved, some have, were happy in their private or charter schools or home schools and all those sorts of things. So I've had a lot of questions about this one, particularly from staff. So
yeah, and it's
I think there's
a little painful.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right, and then the last part of our expenditures that is very new for our eyes is our transfers out. So transfers out is the general fund sending money to other funds to cover expenditures. We have about $2 million in transfers out for next year, and I'll just show you. Last year we had just shy of $900K. So kind of the majority of the transfers out are to cover salary increases for the all other funds. I showed you the FTE, all the FTE from those other federal and state revenues on when we were looking at FTE, and the state didn't cover increases for all those people. So we, of course, when we're giving $6,000 raises, we can't just say only the general fund allowance staff gets them and none other. We are fortunate to have the levy funding to be able to give salary increases to all at the recommended $6,000 increase from legislation and the governor. So these transfers out, these are salary and benefit expenditures, but they don't show up as salary and benefit expenditures as line items. They show up as transfers out. And if you just see a lump sum, it can be a little misleading of what that what does that mean? But we've detailed in our slides and in our budget book what each transfer out is and what contribution each fund gets. Like, for instance, special education, Fund 257, our IDEA federal SPED funding. We've got teacher and classified salaries in there, so they're going to have more of a contribution. So that's what that means. Okay, so fund balance. Fund balance is our beginning fund balance plus the net increase or decrease after looking at revenues and expenditures. We started the year off with a little more than $7 million in our beginning fund balance. The net change in fund balance, so adding our revenues and expenditures, is $828,000, which results in a ending fund balance of almost $8 million. We always need to present the breakdown of the ending fund balance between contingency reserve and unappropriated. Contingency reserve is required by the state and by board policy at 5% of general fund revenues. So that's about $5 million. Unappropriated balance, that is anything in excess of the contingency reserve. If we take a look at what our ending fund balance means to our operating expenditures, it covers almost 100% of 1 month of expenditures. So 1 month of payroll, benefits, and checks for vendors. The Government Finance Officers Association, the nationwide kind of best practices for finance policy for governments, recommends 2 months. I think we've done a great job at least being able to cover 1 month. Even if there wasn't an emergency, that amount is incredibly important for our cash flows. A lot of our federal funds that we pay our staff out of, those are on a reimbursement basis. So we have to have those expenditures before we can ask for the money. So really the general fund helps on a monthly basis with being able to cover those payroll expenditures while we wait for the reimbursement. We don't want to be in a situation where we are waiting a couple weeks or a month from another agency to get revenues and we can't cover payroll. And just looking at our historical general fund balance, we are now at the highest over I think a 14 or a 15 year look. Okay, now I've gone over, so I'll try to go as fast as I can to make it easier for but we are going to take a look at our all other funds now, and this was a big topic during our levy elections. All other funds, I'm going back to the summary page, is the second column. We're kind of going to break down what this beginning balance of $20 million means, and the ending balance is a little more than $17 million. So this column represents 33 additional funds that are restricted for local, state, federal revenue, for debt service and capital projects. So we kind of have to break it down. Can't fit all 33 slides or 33 funds on one slide. So the first category is special revenue funds at the local level. So think of local nonprofit grants, individuals that are giving our district donations that are restricted for a specific purpose. CDA Tribe donates a lot. We're very grateful for them. Those kind of funds would be in local funds. So our first fund is building use, and it is for, we charge fees for people who want to rent our buildings. So that's where the revenue goes into, and we pay for some facility expenditures with that, some software for our rental fees. And then the second, fund that is in there is our School Plus program. So our before and after school program, they generate their own revenues and they have their own expenditures. So that's tracked in a separate fund. Our miscellaneous local grants like I said, CDA, think CDA Tribe, nonprofits. We also use this fund. We make expenditures for our associated student bodies, like payroll and vendors that they can't issue POs for, and they reimburse us back. It nets to zero, but there's a revenue that shows and an expenditure that shows. And then speaking of our associated student bodies, it's a government accounting standard that we have to show our ASB funds at all our buildings on our financials. That was a new standard that that arose a couple of years ago. So really what it does, it kind of inflates our fund balance. It doesn't show that $2 million isn't for district use. That lies with our high schools and our middle schools and our elementary schools. The revenues generated are from gate fees, from fundraisers, from donations, PTA donations, so a lot of different revenues, and it's just for those student bodies to use. So in all, our ending fund balance for these local programs are a little less than $3 million, and it comprises 17% of that big, what's in that $20 million? All right, and then there's our state restricted funds. We've got driver's ed, classroom technology, state grants for career technical education. Our biggest fund is our miscellaneous state fund. There's 3 programs in that fund. Our K through 3 literacy funding. And last year there was a huge increase to literacy funding from the state legislation with the intention to fund full day K. So we've got teacher salaries, kinder salaries coming out of there. So it's the biggest expenditure from state funds, and then you'll see all that FTE. You'll notice there's no ending fund balance. For most state and federal restricted funds, current revenues have to match current expenditures. You need to use those funds on the current year. So none of that goes into that big all other funds ending fund balance. And then for federal, can't go through them all, but this is where our title programs live, our special education federal dollars live, some other miscellaneous federal programs. The only fund where we'll see an ending fund balance is our child nutrition fund. We get federal dollars for meal reimbursement for our free and reduced eligible meal eligible students. So it is a federal funded program. I highlighted in red, we're going to have to really dive into child nutrition next year because they're going to be experiencing a significant deficit. There's kind of 3 major things is that revenues are not coming in as high during COVID. Federal government reimbursed at a much higher rate per meal. We also got several big surplus grants for food shortages and for the increase in food. Now we're back to regular meal reimbursement rates with a culmination of increased food costs, increased salaries because of our salary increases, and there was just less meal revenue. So we're going to have to kind of figure out a solution for that child nutrition program for next year. They have a very healthy beginning fund balance, and they'll have a decent ending fund balance, but that still won't be enough to address another ongoing deficit. So a lot of work to do with child nutrition program that we'll continue to update you on. All right, so our second category of funds is our debt service funds. And the debt service funds, there's 2 funds. There's one for our 2012 bond payments and one for our 2017 bond payments. Really, what it is that we have to levy each year to pay our principal and interest that we owe each year for our bonds. Think of it as a mortgage. When the voters approve of a bond, the voters are not taxed for that full $30 million amount. The financial institution lends the districts the funds to do the $30 million of projects, and then the taxpayers are levied each year to pay the annual principal and interest due. So we always really need a beginning balance in our bond funds because principal and interest is due September 15th each year, so at the start of the year. So that's why there's a rolling fund balance. Then we're excited to see 2012 bond fall off next year. So those principal and interest payments will be done. And then we have till 2032 to pay off 2017. One of the big highlights of this legislative session was House Bill 292. It's a property tax bill, relief bill. And what it does is it lowers the amount of dollars we need to fund to pay off our bond payments. We're expected to get pretty conservative, so I'm expecting hopefully more, about 2.8 million in this property tax relief bill. So our bond payments are about 4 million next year. We would have had to levy for 4 million. Now with that 2.8 million, we can levy for less, which reduces the tax rate for that bond levy. So it goes from 15 cents per 1,000 to 5 cents per thousand. So 11-cent drop. So pretty significant. If a median priced homeowner, they'll expect to save about $43 per year with that new estimated rate. All right, and then so our last category of all other funds, and that represents 34% of that ending fund balance. So our last category is our capital projects funds. We have 4 funds in that category. We have a slight rollover balance for 2017 bond projects. We're using that money to help pay for that CHS HVAC project. We have our bus depreciation fund, so that pays for our buying those school buses, and it is state revenue that the general fund receives, and we transfer it into the bus depreciation fund. One of the big ones is our land acquisition fund. We have a carryover of $4 million. We received that from the sale of Hayden, and I don't remember the other. Okay, yeah, and then that fund is going to be that's committed for future land development. I know $4 million sounds like a lot, but that's 2 weeks of general fund operating expenditures. It's really the only investment we have in land, and it would, if we target it to ongoing costs, it would cover 2 weeks of operating expenditures. So not a lot when you're thinking of our $97 million general fund budget. And then our last one is our plant facilities fund. Last year, the board committed $5 million to this fund from ESSER savings. We charged general fund salaries to ESSER, resulting in savings for the general fund. We transferred that into the plant facilities fund and committed it for deferred maintenance. For next year, we have some projected projects that we wanted to outline in our budget book. It'll be more detailed of what those funds will go to, and we'll have it by building as well. And that is almost half of that ending fund balance. I wanted to provide percentages because really this 17 million ending fund balance, it's restricted. It is, it would be hard to transfer it. Well, some of it's legally not able to transfer, and the other funds and the capital projects, if you take a look at what it means, it's our only investment as a district, and it would be gone in 1 month if we used it for ongoing operations, and there wouldn't be an ongoing funding source for those amounts. Okay, so next steps. As far as the budget goes, we're presenting the budget hearing today. The budget is available for review, and then we'll bring it back to for budget adoption on June 26th. We're also releasing a new budget book on or before that date, and that takes that really not user-friendly big 100-page document, still a 100-page document, but it provides narrative. It makes it user-friendly, the financial statements a little more user-friendly, and breaks the funds down better, provides FTE and narrative as well, and how revenues work, and kind of the biggest financial updates to each fund or program.
And that's a new thing in
That's a brand new endeavor that we are doing.
Did that come out of your recent training? that you were at?
that is-
Or where'd that concept come
I've
from?
been stalking West Ada and Boise, and they have incredible budget books that they've won awards for. So it's our first attempt to try to provide more transparency with our budget. It's a work in progress. It takes years to develop these kinds of budget packets, but it's a first attempt.
Terrific. Thanks.
And then, so July through August, we close the books. And then in September, we report how FY23 actually spanned out, what our actual ending fund balance was for. We commence our budget subcommittee in September. And then in October, we will do a first update to the FY24 budget with all known personnel changes. So at the start of the budget hearing, we took a look at what our FY23 goals and concerns going into after budget, the FY23 budget. One of our stakeholder concerns was the salaries and competitive wages. I'm marking that done for now. We had an incredible salary package with the funding from the levy and the legislation. So I think we're in a great spot to be competitive for next year. Ongoing concerns, though, are we still need to find an ongoing revenue source for our deferred maintenance, and then we're still going to have to face inflation and rising cost challenges. So next year, we're bringing these two over again for goals, along with our commitment to continue to provide transparency and trust with our community, with our financial resources, and align those resources to the strategic plan. And one step that we are taking to do that is, as part of our budget subcommittee next year, we're going to have stakeholders, board, staff, and community stakeholders, and we're going to go through a program called the Smarter School Spending Program. It's sponsored by the Government Finance Officers Association. I talked about it briefly at our prior meeting, and really it's a roadmap. It's a step-by-step procedure to look at your programs, making sure they are aligning to your strategic plan, looking at programs that, after looking at data and achievement data, they might not be working, and we might need to repurpose that for another use. We don't know at this point, so we're going to dive into each department, each staffing category, and the program has tons of templates and tools for us to do that. So that is it for the budget. I'm sorry, I tried to talk fast. It's a lot of information, but very important for our public to know about our budget. So thank you so much. If you have any questions for me.
First of all, thank you to you and your team. For sure, that is a lot of work. I'm excited about the Smarter School Spending and what that will look like for next year. And one of the things we continue to have comments on, and I think the Smarter School Spending speaks to that, but is just the call for a different audit. Mm-hmm. Could you just speak to that again? Just
the call for the forensic audit. Yeah, forensic audit is when there is suspected fraud or known fraud. I've actually been in districts down in the border region that had to go under a forensic audit. Multiple agencies had to be brought in. We have clean audits. We have great internal controls. We've heard no fraud evident. So a forensic audit doesn't do that. Think of the FBI or the IRS coming in because they know something's going on. We have our annual financial audit that reviews all our internal controls and makes sure that we have no findings. And then the state reviews most of our federal expenditures. We report all of our state expenditures to the state, and they do their own review and audits, and they will let us know if something we have to explain every time, hey, what's this field trip for? Is this an educational purpose? It's very in-depth. So really what we need is the Smarter School Spending Program to bring awareness to our budget. A budget there's no fraud in the budget, but we need to show our community what we're doing with our dollars and showing that we are spending them, that the resources that align with our goals, and that we're not overspending. I think it's a tribute to the fact that we have an operating surplus for the year. We've boosted our ending fund balance a little bit to have that 1 month of payroll expenditures, and we'll continue to strive for a little bit of an operating surplus.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
Thank you.
Terrific. Ms. Southwick, is there any public comment for this evening on the sheet? There's not. There's no public comment then this evening, and so this will conclude then our public budget hearing, and then we will transition to our June regular board meeting. All right, and thank you, Shannon, and your team. All right. Okay. Let me go back here. All right, we'd like to celebrate this evening. And again, if you want to sign in for our regular board meeting for any public comment, feel free to do that at the back. We're going to celebrate our Teachers of the Month.
All right. For April, we didn't get a chance to recognize our high school teacher of the month because of some conflicts. So our high school teacher of the month in April was Christy Smith. She's an ELA teacher at Venture High School. Her principal says, Mrs. Smith is the kind of English teacher that kids remember forever. She takes great care to ensure that every student feels welcome, valued, and respected. So congratulations to Mrs. Smith. Our elementary teacher of the month for May was Kelly Osler. She's a special education teacher at Dalton Elementary. Her principal says she invests her whole heart into the social, emotional, and academic growth of the students she serves in the Learning Lab. She has high expectations for all her students and instills confidence in them to achieve their lofty goals. For middle school in May, it was Nancy Littoral. She's a 6th grade ELA teacher at Woodland. Her principal said this about her. He said, Nancy spent several years as a middle school special education teacher prior to transitioning to a 6th grade ELA position this year. She made this move as part of a pilot program to meet the needs of our sixth grade students. Her students have flourished this year and shown individual growth from the beginning of the year to the spring. Her intervention background has been a huge reason for the success of our 6th grade students. So congratulations to her. And then for high school in May, our teacher of the month was Ron Jacobson. He's a math teacher at Lake City. His principal says, Mr. Jacobson is one of the kindest, most compassionate teachers we know. He makes math so fun for his students. Mr. Jacobson also devotes many hours every week beyond the school day to ensure that all students receive all the assistance and support that they need. So congratulations to all those teachers of the month. And then additionally, we had Tanya Lilly. She received the Idaho State Society Daughters of American Revolution 2023 Idaho Outstanding Teacher of American History. So she's a history teacher at Lakes Middle School. And that's pretty cool that she won that award for the whole state. Congrats to her.
Can I say
Yes.
something else about her? Is that she does take students. It's separate and apart from the district, but it was like students. Every spring, she's the teacher that takes them on the international trips. And so this past spring break, they all went to Scotland, they went to Rome, and then they're going on a month-long trip in Europe this month. And so it's separate and apart from the district, but she's the one that champions that for our students, really. So I just want to point that out about her. It's pretty great.
Awesome. And then we also had some student achievements. Trevor Cogley was the state champion in the 400 meter. He's a runner at Lake City High School. Our boys tennis team was the academic state champions. And I believe our boys from CHS, and our boys cross country team from CHS was also the academic state champions. So congratulations to those students this month also.
I guess. No. I'm excited to welcome up to the podium our Growing the STEM board members this evening. So, no, come on right up here. Yeah, come on up to the front. And the whole board can come up, and I want to take a moment to be able to recognize this tremendous part of our community and our schools. So, Up in front, you'll see our Growing the STEM board members and leaders. Growing the STEM has been serving our students in our school district since 2017 with after-school STEM programs, including Math is Cool Coaching, Mathletes, STEM Club, STEAM Club, STEM Book Club, Architecture Club, and Engineering Club. Their mission is to organize and support math and science programs for students in Coeur d'Alene Public Schools with an emphasis on developing youth leaders and encouraging underrepresented groups to pursue STEM education and activities. The nonprofit was founded by students Lillian and Adeline Smith and has a key major focus on youth leadership, as youth coaches or mentors are a key part of each program. This year, they had 42 programs in District 271 and served over 800 students at the elementary and middle school levels, including programs at every district elementary school and 2 out of 3 of our middle schools. They also recruited, trained, and placed over 90 volunteer student coaches from our secondary schools. It's a lot of students. Their foundation is principally in math education, and they focus on including students of all ability levels and targeting resources to schools where students have the least access to fee-based programs. Their goals focus on academic engagement, confidence building, relationship building, and fun. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I would like to thank Board President Rebecca Smith and the entire board of Growing the STEM for their excellent program and for the impact it has made over the years to so many students. We've got a certificate for you, and I will say that I was asking my 4th grade daughter what one of her favorite parts about school was this year, and being a part of Math is Cool and Mathletes hit the top, and I was like, really? She was so excited about it. So, did you want to say a few words, or was Luke going to say? Okay, all right. So, I'm timing. Okay, there you go.
I'll go quick. Thank you to the board and the district for recognizing the contributions of Growing the STEM over the past 6 years in our school district. My name is Luke Sharon, and I'm a Growing the STEM board member and student coach. This evening, I'm joined by some of my colleagues on the GTS board and by principals Kathy Livingston of Fernand and Pret Depew of Sorensen. They're sitting down, but they're here. Yeah. So they were willing to jump in and give our programs a try back in 2017, and it's because of their willingness to do this and to jump on board that we now serve over 800 students in our school district each year. They're an essential part of our story, and we're grateful for their leadership. I chose to become involved with Growing the STEM because of the opportunity it gives students. We provide programs to schools like Bora. Otherwise, these students may never know the benefits of STEM. In my mind, if we're able to introduce these students to engineering or the fun of math for the first time, that's a win. I joined Growing the STEM to give students in our district the same opportunities that I had at my disposal when I was in elementary school. To this end, we're hosting our trivia night this Thursday at Le Peep, presented by Northwest Specialty Hospital. Please visit growingthestem.org to buy tickets or donate to support STEM programs in your schools. Thanks again for this recognition.
We are so thankful for all of your work and for making this possible for all of our students. Did you get the picture that? Terrific. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Rebecca Smith, or maybe both Rebecca Smiths, you're both in the same room, so it's extra confusing. Did I see that Growing the STEM's looking for a new executive director?
We are, yes.
And where, if someone was interested, where could they find out information on that?
They can go to our website to find out information, or Indeed.com. We are conducting what looks to be maybe final interviews this week.
Oh, okay.
So if someone sees this and feels like that was a missed opportunity, they should reach out like tomorrow.
Okay.
But lots of ways to get involved no matter what. So if it's a passion, and it's great for our district.
For our board, for student coaches, who want to get involved, so they can check out our website.
Terrific. Thank you. Thanks so much. Next up, we do have a video presentation, I believe, for K-Tech, it looks like.
One of the greatest aspects of K-Tech, Kootenai Technical Education Campus, is that they offer hands-on experience and industry
Seth, we can't
certifications
totally
that
hear it.
prepare students for the workforce. Recently, K-Tech has been hosting several job fairs to connect students with employers relating to their area of study. On April 29th, K-Tech hosted their 2022 job fair. This fair featured several local businesses in automotive, construction, HVAC, and welding industries. The businesses were able to set up tables and share information about their companies with students. There were also specialized programs for each of the industries in attendance where students could gain more information about future careers. On May 20th, K-Tech hosted their healthcare job fair. As of right now, the Health Professions program is the largest program offered at K-Tech, with over 90 students. Most, if not all, of the health profession students leave K-Tech with a job in healthcare. Some will go on to the NIC Workforce Training Center for more certifications, and some will go to a college for an advanced degree. These job fairs give students a unique opportunity to meet with employers and even secure jobs for after high school. Students leave K-Tech with many skills, including collaborating and communicating with real employers and clients. Students also gain hands-on experience working in their industry of interest. Each K-Tech program leads to industry-specific certifications. These certifications include ASE, Automotive Service Excellence, for automotive, diesel, and collision repair. CNA, Certified Nurse's Aide, for health professions. CompTIA, for computer repair. SolidWorks Certification, for manufacturing and design. American Welding Society, for welding. EPA Refrigerant Certification, for HVAC. OSHA Certification. Forklift Certification. National Center for Construction Educational Research, for construction. The Adobe Creative Cloud Professional Certifications in Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, Premiere Pro, for graphic design and media. In celebration of completing the program, a barbecue is held at the end of the year in which the students receive their K-Tech certifications and are congratulated by their instructors, peers, and guardians. As always, these events could not be done without the continued support of the Coeur d'Alene School District. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, K-Tech. And next up, do we have a video from CHS? Terrific.
Leader, and Lily Lowry, ASB Treasurer. We are proud to update you on the happenings of May as well as these first weeks of June.
We started off May with our senior events, Mother-Daughter Tea, Father-Son Barbecue, and Senior Sunset. We are grateful to get to facilitate these memories for our seniors and their loved ones.
We had Mr. CHS on May 25th, and it was so good to see our community show up and support our boys. We had Bobby Dorme, who won Mr. CHS. On June 2nd, we had Spring Swing, which was a turnout for Coeur d'Alene High School. It was our first ever one.
Our seniors presented their senior projects, and we would like to take the time to thank the community for their time to judge. Students will be working on their finals from June 5th to June 9th. We are also so proud of the class of 2023 and their diligence and dedication throughout the school year. We would like to honor Turner Cox as the valedictorian and Riley Yake as a salutatorian.
This May, we sent softball, tennis, track, and skeet and trap off to state. Skeet and trap placed second. We are always so proud of our Viking athletes and all that they do. We also sent our environmental science students off to the Youth Water Summit at U of I. We are so proud of their performance.
We welcome the class of 2027 into Viking Halls, and we have to say our Viking future is bright. But we'd like to take a moment to reflect on this past year and thank you all for this continuous support and everything you do for our school district. We hope you have a great summer and roll Vikes!
And I believe we have all of Lake City High School's ASB here. Congratulations on the first day of summer.
Hello? Oh, no. Okay, yeah, this is my favorite way to start the first day of summer. All right, good evening, esteemed board chair, honorable trustees, and district administration. My name is Luke Sharon, and I'm the new Lake City ASB president for this upcoming year. Joining me this evening are ASB Vice President Ashley Kearns, ASB Secretary Bradley Gilmore, and ASB Treasurer Nathan Edmonds. We're honored and excited to represent our school at this meeting for the first time tonight.
Spring has been very busy and productive for our Timberwolves, with many things to celebrate in the last few weeks. We held our annual senior paint night and hosted a very successful dodgeball tournament sponsored by STCU, which saw students from teams, and we ate pizza there. Our lacrosse team took second place, and our baseball team also placed second at the state tournament. Moreover, we also had a state champion in track, which we honored earlier, Trevor Cogley, who competed and won in the 400-meter dash. Maddie Nesbitt also succeeded at a state tournament and was a state finalist in tennis. Furthermore, Blake Buchanan, one of our 2023 varsity basketball players, was invited to play for Team USA.
Moving on to the arts, at solo ensemble, Olin Young won first place, and Liam Fish with Derek McNee achieved all-state recognition. Our spring play concluded with the showings of Lucky Stiff, which was simply amazing. It was a fun and wild adventure, and I apologize to those that missed it.
Also, Michael Phelps came to our district to talk about mental health, not only at Lake City, but also at CHS. A big thank you to the Phelps Foundation and to the Interact Club for putting this event together.
End of the year preparations and festivities were also in full swing at Lake City last week. We held our senior awards night at Lake City on Thursday, June 1st, where 27 seniors graduated with their associate's degrees from NIC. Combined, the seniors who were recognized at the award night collectively earned over $1.5 million in various scholarships. Also that week, our DECA class put on their spring blood drive, which had a very strong turnout for. Lastly, graduation took place this past Saturday. Congratulations to the class of 2023. We can't wait to see what you all do in the future.
We appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all this evening, and we look forward to seeing you the rest of the school year. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you all. And congratulations on your appointment to this position.
And before you go, I think in 8 years, you're the first students to come in the summertime. So thank you for your dedication. And Luke, way to line things up to be efficient. You get 3 reports in one night. I mean, geez, share the mic.
And now we will have our SAG report.
All right. Good evening, esteemed board members, Dr. Hawker, Ms. Southwick, and members of our community. My name is Luke Sharon. This year, I served as vice chair of our student advisory group. Our yearly SAG retreat was held at CHS High School, Coeur d'Alene High School, where students engaged in games and brainstorming sessions to explore ways to enhance our schools. The retreat enabled each elementary, middle, and high school branch to identify key characteristics to focus on in the upcoming year. During this retreat, we also conducted elections for the next year's student advisory group leadership. For next year, I'm honored to serve as the chair of our student advisory group, and Caleb Torgensen from CHS will serve as vice chair. Looking ahead to next year, SAG's one ask for the school board is to establish a committed board liaison for the upcoming year, someone who can and will attend some of our meetings and establish a direct connection between the board and the student advisory group. Lastly, we would like to express our gratitude to the district and in particular Mr. Derek for attentively addressing our concerns throughout the entire year. Thank you for everyone's continued support of student advocacy, and we can't wait to see what next year holds. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any board members have any questions for Luke?
Luke, why don't you recap a couple things SAG did this year that you felt like you got accomplished?
Absolutely.
Like with the bathroom, there was something in the boys' bathrooms, right? The dividers?
We, for the beginning of the school year, we focused on student privacy And so we looked at the boys and the girls' restrooms, and we put in urinal dividers, which I think is what you're referring to. But we also started a discussion with school administrators about girls' bathrooms. There's gaps in between the stalls that people can see through, which make people who use the girls' bathroom uncomfortable. And so we had a conversation about that. We also opened the discussion again for school security at Lake City. I attended a building leadership team meeting, and we brought it back up again, and that was really great. And then we also released a report to high school administrators that went down we did this big survey through Lake City and CHS. We got like 2,000 responses, and we gave it to the administrators, and we said, hey, this is what we have taken from all of these survey results, and we asked them to have a discussion with their staff, and we thought of different ways we can implement the findings into our everyday school life.
Thank you. Any other additional questions? Thank you, Luke, for all your work and your leadership this year, and as well to our SAG leadership for helping move it all along.
Also came on the first day of summer.
Yeah. Terrific. Thank you. Thanks. I'd like to recognize the CEA this evening, and I don't believe that Mr. Hayes is going to give a report, but we have a report here in
Luke was going to answer any questions.
Just keep them going. So, all right. Thank you, Aaron, for your letter here, and especially I love the recognition there about scholarships that are going out to 3 students from the CEA, especially. So, thank you for that. All right, Ms. Southwick, was there any public comment? No public. Won't even read the thing, our guidelines then. And we did receive just multiple letters recently about different things. The community is always welcome to send us an email at trustees@cdaschools.org. All right. I believe next up is our long-range planning committee report, and Mr. Voller is going to give that report as our long-range planning committee president had a conflict that came up at the last minute. So thank you, Mr. Voller.
Yeah, I'm going to be representing Lindsay Swingrover, who was our long-range planning chair. So she drafted a written statement in her absence, and I'm just going to read that to you. So bear with me as I read through this. Chair Smith, Dr. Hawker, distinguished board, I apologize that I cannot share in person this evening due to a sick child while my husband is on a business trip, but appreciate the opportunity to update about the long-range planning committee this year. I had the honor of serving as the chair of the committee this last year. Michelle Johnson has been vice chair and was just elected to chair for the next year. Jason Hoover has stepped forward and been elected vice chair. They've been highly involved and are both going to bring smart, thoughtful leadership to the committee. This year was productive, and we had great attendance and participation. Some of our highlights were having Sam Wolkenauer visit and share about the state and local trends and give us updated data and predictive models now that we have a little more space between us that the pandemic disrupting previous trends. While elementary enrollment continues to be somewhat lower than the 1920 school year, secondary enrollment is a bit higher than pre-COVID levels, as you all know. We learned more about education funding in Idaho, including legislative updates, and were kept abreast of plans if the levy had failed. We followed progress of the Cortair development, the boundary swap, and of course reviewed the massive deferred maintenance spreadsheet, including with a subcommittee for more detailed discussion. At our last meeting, we discussed what we would like the board to know, and we all feel extremely grateful that the board heard our support for the SPFL and opted to run it twice. The committee was initially unanimous in recommending it and continues to be highly disappointed that it did not pass. In a discussion at our last meeting, it was clear that interest remains high for addressing deferred maintenance. While some one-time funds have been redirected to those most emerging problems, it is definitely a priority of the current committee that the district find a way to steward property predictability before the fixes become more expensive. Secondary to the SPFL, long-range planning continues to recommend that the board prioritize a new middle school to relieve the significant and pervasive overcrowding at the middle schools. As of June 2022, we advised running a bond for that between 2022 and 2025. Skyway also remains significantly over capacity. We recommend that next year's long-range planning committee look at the 10-year plan in order to ensure that the plan continues to reflect the greatest needs of our district, especially in light of the changes to statewide enrollment boundaries. We know that this is no light recommendation and encourage the district and board to continue brainstorming about how to demonstrate to the community ways that it is transparent, but also right-sized for someone who doesn't regularly read large corporate budgets, like all of us, almost all of us. May we suggest our long-range plan as a resource, actually. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to lead this committee and to share with you. Please feel free to send questions my way, and I'll answer as quickly as I can. I look forward to finishing out my term as a committee member. Thank you for your service to our community and children. Lindsay Swingrover.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Ms. Southwick, would you make sure, I know that will go into our board packet, but maybe just to email each of us that as well. Jeff, you were there and present and helped lead long range. Any feedback from your end or anything you'd like to comment on?
Yeah, this was an interesting year for us in light of just the levies. And, we had a lot of discussion about the levies. And, I would, extend the gratitude that they said to this board for stepping out to run the school plant facility levies. And I know it is disappointing that those failed, but I think you can see from the committee that, there is, a strong recommendation from them to continue to look at alternative, for that. What can we do? I know Shannon was talking a little bit about that in the budget presentation as well. And, we're grateful for those funds that we've put in there to, for the fix for this next year. That will sustain us for a little bit, but it still doesn't get us to the point where there's the long-term sustainability of what to do with that deferred maintenance. So I think that will continue to be a priority. And, so I think as we start to see more stabilization now as we come out of the pandemic and, are starting to realize what the new trends are, it will give more direction for the future of the long-range planning committee as they move forward.
Thank you. Any additional questions for long range? And I know Lindsay's not here, but great thanks just to all of long range planning, especially this year and in their meetings. And Trustee Tenbrink, you were served on long range. Any comments and things we should know?
I think Lindsay and Jeff covered most of it. It was the committee was really grateful we ran some SPFLs. They were sad they didn't pass, and they still feel like there's definitely a need there based on the information that they've spent more time with than I think as average in our community. So, so that'll be something to address in the future in some way.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Trustee Tenbrink, you recently went to the ISBA Institute training that was held here, and could you maybe give us some reflections?
So it was a very interesting meeting. It was all about governance, particularly like trustees and superintendents and school administration kind of working together in governance. So there were several things covered. It was a 4-hour training, but the thing I chose to kind of pull out was part of it talked about trustees, kind of our part in that team, and one of the things that the trainer brought out was kind of 4 priorities for trustees as we go about our business. The first one was systems thinking. And that was kind of looking at the whole system, like not looking like a wide-angle lens was one of the analogies they gave. Understanding that different parts interact with, you change one part, it's going to have an effect on another part, like the interaction between parts of a system. Another analogy we discussed was if you're like at a dance, it's like the difference between being on the balcony, like we should be on the balcony where we can like see all the dancers rather than dancing on the dance floor where you just see your partner and the ones around you. So the second thing he discussed was strategic focus. And this is kind of related to systems thinking. And just he kind of defined it as purposeful action and avoiding kind of being distracted by the day-to-day administration, because we're kind of supposed to be like more strategic in our focus rather than on individual things, right? The third thing he talked about was deep learning, and that which includes like learning about school trends and systems and new things, but also just things like being prepared for our board meetings and understanding how to use data, which I think is something we're working on. And then the fourth thing he brought out was manner, basically the way we communicate. So, the goal is kind of high quality communication and a patient, understanding, and courteous environment, both between us and with school administration and with our community members. So it was a good training.
Terrific. Any questions or anything else? Thank you for attending that. I know that they passed out a book, I believe.
Oh, yes.
Right? The
Yeah.
governance score, and I didn't get a chance to attend, but I did ask for just a copy of it, so I'm excited to look.
Yeah, it was a hard one because it was during graduation week, so
It
it
was
gave me some
hard.
pause.
There's a lot of things. Yeah, terrific. Great, thank you. Dr. Hawker, do you have any comments?
I just
report
have
for
a
this
quick,
evening?
just a quick seed to plant on behalf of KTEC. We'll be having a board meeting next week for further discussions. They have received a grant of about $150,000 to add on to their welding lab, which is awesome and very much needed, very undersized, and we're having to turn lots of kids away. We're anticipating the cost for that project to be probably closer to $500,000, $500,000. So when we get together, we're going to visit as to possibly what could we do. All three districts have talked about and floated the idea around of maybe chipping in a little bit of money to try to help fill that gap to get that done. I'll bring more details to you after we meet next week. I just wanted to basically plant that seed. Overall, it's an incredible that we just have so many kids that are wanting to get into KTEC, and the campus is now too small. So we've got to figure out a long-term plan there. So just wanted to update the board on that, and that's all I have for superintendent comments tonight.
Great, thank you. All right, we have our consent agenda before us. Is there any questions or comments on anything on our consent agenda? And if not, then is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, consent is approved. There's additional information there, and any questions for the district and Dr. Hawker on any of those items?
I guess I have a question about it's a little bit of a clarification or change in the, it's 3330P, the student discipline. Do you want to?
So just specifically, do you have a question you'd like to?
Well, I mean,
ask?
so the goal here, because the goal here was to change what triggered a student for an automatic expulsion, correct? So is that what we've accomplished?
Yeah, so no, that's a great question. I just wanted to make sure. So when we looked at the policy, the current procedure, is 3330P. The current procedure states, and you'll see that in the crossed out version, the strike-through version, says a student shall be expelled for any violation of any of the policy. And the policy just treats anybody with a dangerous weapon the same. According to the Idaho Code makes a very distinct differentiation between a firearm and any other dangerous weapon. And so what we've done is I asked Lynn Townsend to contact the ISBA, and then I inquired about our Idaho Code and how could we make this procedure more in alignment with the Idaho Code. And in the process of doing that, it's actually been vetted by the ISBA legal team to make that distinction. So in 3330P right here, what it states is if there's a student that has a firearm, it still reads as shall be expelled, okay, because that's the way it explicitly states it in Idaho Code. However, it says when it talks about
other dangerous weapons, it says, at its discretion, the board may expel a student. So by making that differentiation, we also have a policy or a procedure 3340P, which is the District Discipline Review Committee, the DDRC. And we haven't utilized that very much. But in essence, what that says is in the District Discipline Review Committee, it says the purpose, the District Discipline Review Committee is a level 3 discipline intervention, and the purpose of this particular committee is to kind of be as a last resort. So it talks about that students may be referred to the DDRC because of the severity of an offense or a series of offenses. So in other words, this is a stopgap. Whoops, excuse me. This would be like a stopgap. So for example, in some of the situations that we had this year, because it says may, it gives us the latitude to talk to administration and say, is this an offense where the student was intending to use this particular weapon in some kind of threatening manner? And we've had a few situations where it wasn't, right? And so therefore, even though it's serious, we don't want to have these weapons on campus. That can go to the DDRC, and we can deal with that from an district administrative level, and we don't have to go directly to the school board for an expulsion. So what does that do for us? It does a couple of things. One is it allows us to get those students who are suspended back into school quicker because we can convene this DDRC much faster. And I think that's an important consideration right there. And then also what we can do is, what I can assure you is if we feel there is any dangerous intent, we will take that to the board. And that would be the recommendation that we would do. But in the meantime, we can actually deal with the fact and kind of counsel and talk about how important it is not to have these particular items, whatever they may be, that are dangerous on campus. And we can mitigate in that way without having to go directly to the school board for an expulsion hearing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions about that particular procedure? Okay.
All right. Any additional questions or any additional information? I think we'll move into our action items tonight, and we have a number of policies here. The next couple meetings will be full of just different policies. Lots. And so the first policy up for today is policy 1315, district planning. And so Dr. Hawker, is there anything you'd like to present there?
Well, not specifically, unless there's any specific questions. We've shown you the redlined version. Our intent would be to put this out for public comment for the next board meeting until your regular board meeting in July, and see if there's any additional comments. And that would be really our intent for about every one of these policies.
And these policies, at least those first 4, are ones that came through ISBA recommendations, updated language.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. That is right. And we've actually listed that in there. So you can see these are required ISBA updates. So based on that, we have prioritized those to make sure we bring those to you as early as possible. I believe they have released about 30 additional policy updates, and we're in the process of working through those, and we'll be bringing those through this summer.
Are we distinguishing, there's kind of 2 ways ISBA does it. They have recommended updates, and then they have legally required updates.
That is correct.
So which are
these are required. So the ones that we brought to you, they specifically say this is required. For instance, 1315, that's a required update. So those we're bringing for sure. The recommended, we are reviewing those, and we may or may not have that policy. Most of the time we do. We have, I think, more policies than most school districts from what Board Docs has told us. So we're making some updates and modifications as appropriate. And then, of course, the policies that are presented to us that are optional, those are our third priority. So we will get to those as soon as we can. But since they're not required, we're not trying to push those along too terribly quick today.
And I'm sorry. are the required updates based on state and federal law. That's what makes them required.
That is correct. It could be requirements of a new law that has come out that has tweaked something. It could also be requirements of an existing policy, and maybe they handled a case, some sort of a lawsuit where the school district was involved, and they have felt that had they have made this tweak to this policy, their case would have been maybe better or something. So it could come from any and all of those examples.
I was just going to say, it's shocking, I'm sure, but we actually have a policy on policy. And I think our policy on policy says that if they're legal requirements, then there is no review period and we can just approve them, I believe, because you really don't have a choice.
CKC, out of the 800 policies we have, that's one I wasn't even aware of. So that's really, okay, well, there you go.
I think so. But I mean, these are probably, if we've noted them, it's in their legal changes, the law probably doesn't go into effect till July 1st, so it's probably not a big deal. But I know that's how we've treated it in the past, because they're, like I said, if they're a legal change, you don't have a choice.
Well, I'm writing that down, and we'll move forward with that. That could really expedite the process as well. Any of those that are required. So
right, and I think we treat the ones. There's a number that you have to review annually. We treat those the same way, that they come for review, but we don't put them out for comment again.
All right, then. The second policy then, 3030, is on dual enrollment, and that is an update. Let's see here. Oh, it's required to update. Any questions on that policy? It's on dual enrollment and the kind of services for students with disabilities. All right, we'll move on then to policy 3440. This is an optional ISB update that notes that students may be charged a fee for online courses when taken at the student's preference. Any questions on that policy? All right, that one will go out then for first reading. The next one is policy 3525, immunization requirements, and this is a first reading, and ISBA recommends updates, and there's some clarity and consistency in there. So we'll send that out then for public comment. And then, we
send those two out.
I would say, because the packet says we're going to send them all, we should send them all. But
I'll make a motion to send policies 1315, 3030, 3440, and 3525 out for public comment, period.
Great. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll send those all out this time and then look at how we do it for next time. That'd be great. Trustee Morrisroe, would you introduce the next item?
yeah, so this next one is actually a procedure that we looked at. I don't know, I thought it was about a year and a half ago. In a little different form, I think, but I thought about it after the last couple of months of public comment. We've had some really long public comment times and some long meetings. And kind of in my history, when meetings get long, discussions at this point get pretty bad, just because we all start losing focus after sitting here for 3 or 4 hours, or I do at least. And so I looked at a number of boards and committees around us to see kind of how they're handling public comment. And it's a mixed bag. I would say a slight majority reserve public comment only for agenda items. And so that's what I proposed here. That's what I asked, is that we bring this back and include that language that public comment would be still be allowed at our regular meetings, but it would only be on published board agenda items. Kind of my thoughts there again are just the length of our meeting, kind of the increase in public comment we've seen. And really these board meetings are for us to, I think it even says in the documents there. It's for the board to conduct district business. And I think sometimes we get bogged down with comment. Like I said last meeting, I don't believe that public comment's the most efficient way for us to take it. I prefer the forums, that we've talked about doing. We've kind of done one or two here and there, but doing something like that more regularly. Email at least allows for two-way conversation, or oftentimes a cup of coffee works best for me with someone when they have a question. So that was kind of my goal, and I just thought I'd bring it back. I'd ask that we entertain it and put it out for public comment, but I'll leave that to the board.
Thoughts and questions around this, because it really is back on us just to kind of
Yeah, we did
decide
talk
what we
about
wanted.
it,
Yeah,
I think about a year or so ago. I have a little bit different thought on that. I realize that our last couple of board meetings have been extremely long, and but I also think that doesn't happen very often. More often than not, most of our comments are sticking to the agenda items. So I really think we need to have the ability to be nimble to react to contemporary needs of our patrons, and by eliminating public comment, it jeopardizes our ability to do that. I mean, yes, there's other ways, but sometimes things creep up that need to be spoken, and people want to have that option to do it public. So I'd prefer not to have that in there, and that's kind of my thought. That's kind of where I am right now.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, of our local school districts, I think Lakeland, and I wanted to reach out to one of their board members today, and I didn't get a chance. They went maybe a little further on this about a year ago, where you had to sign up, I think, by Friday and turn in a form, and then they told you if you were approved to speak or not. And when I went to look at that policy this morning, I saw they tweaked it in January, and they've gone back to something kind of what we're proposing here, but they still have a form. You can fill it out at the meeting, but you basically have to say, this is on an agenda item, this agenda item. You kind of acknowledge some of Rebecca's rules that she reads. I won't talk about a specific person. I won't do this and that. NIC is the other one that restricts to board agenda items. Post Falls School District did not. And those were the ones I looked at. City councils were kind of a mixed bag. Some of them in the county, I believe 2 of them, it's agenda items only, and 2, it's anything.
What does Coeur d'Alene City Council do? Do you know?
I believe Coeur d'Alene was anything. And it looked like to me they changed. I always thought they were 2 minutes, and now they're 3 minutes according to their policy.
My feelings would still be the same as before as far as this is concerned. Anything restricting public comment from our community members, I think, is unnecessary. And like Leslie said, it's not like it happens that often that we're here for a long period of time for public comment. And I think as trustees, it would be wise of us to leave that open to them to address what they would like to in our board meetings with comments.
I actually lean away from this as well. I understand your point that to do our business we have to be not already worn out from sitting here, right? But I agree, it's not every meeting. We could consider a form, rather than restricting it to agenda items, we could kind of require some sort of pre-understanding and acknowledgement of our comment guidelines. I would be open to that for sure. Part of what we need to address, I feel like, is we have comments on the same thing, right? And I don't know.
Can I speak to that really quick? Because I do think it's hard when we're sitting here, so we put in that time limit kind of piece, which I appreciate, but I think it's hard to then, when you're looking at a list of 5 more people, and even though it's going to be another 20 minutes, or whatever on there, you're thinking, well, they're still here, and then if the last person that came in is on a totally different topic, and I guess that would be whoever is in the chair spot then but then it feels strange and not welcoming of those that have then sat through the first 45 minutes. That for me is the piece that's conflicting, that at that point, I guess if we as a trustees fully recognize that and said, yep, these are the topics that are still to come, we're not going to hear. But I think maybe as trustees, we need to all be on that and behind that at that moment.
One thing I saw, and I can't remember who it was in looking at the policies, but maybe this would address some of that, is you couldn't provide the same comment, or you couldn't comment on the same subject matter at like back-to-back meetings, I think. Like an individual couldn't, and I don't know that that's a huge issue for us either. But
it could encourage consolidation of topics. Like, when you give your little spiel at the beginning, I mean, we kind of did that, I think, recently, didn't we? In one of the meetings that we kind of encouraged, like if you've already heard your ideas spoken of, maybe, but encourage a consolidation of ideas for them. So I agree that it's not that we don't want to hear it, but we do have work to do as well. But I just don't think that we need to restrict it at all. I think it jeopardizes our ability to be as responsive to people as we need to be.
Dr. Hucker, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, yes, thanks, Chair Smith. First, I want to make sure that I'm on the record to be very clear that this in no way is meant to stifle public comment. This is to be specific. I think what I see happening and how I'm viewing this, we're working our tails off trying to create communication with our community, and we don't get to do it right here. We sit here for 45 minutes and listen to comment, and that's it. There's no dialogue back and forth, whereas a cup of coffee, an email, those kinds of exchanges, other avenues create opportunities for people to get their questions answered. We hear things all the time from the pulpit, and it might be the first time we've ever even heard anything, and it might be blatantly wrong, and they leave not knowing an answer because we don't dialogue back with them, and that is where I think you'll see, several school districts and other boards, but specifically school districts that simply just make any time somebody's talking in this meeting specific to the agenda item at hand, never meaning to stifle public comment. We want to be able to engage and answer questions and meet their needs, and in this current structure, it's much more difficult. This is one of those procedures that I would classify as our one-offs. It's a procedure, and usually by default, administration puts procedures together, and we just come and tell you and inform you. They don't go to vote. They don't go out to the public. It's a procedure. But this is all about you. It's all about the board, and I feel like you guys need to decide how you want to run your meetings and how you want to engage with the community and how you want to communicate. And that's all. I want to increase our communication opportunities, and I feel like when people come in and talk about something that we don't even, it's not on the agenda, we don't know what it's whatever it is, and then they leave, there's just that. To me, it creates a bigger divide in communication. But an email, the board forums that we've had, I think those are great opportunities. And then you guys are really good about answering most of your emails that come your way. And so it generates things. If somebody asks you a question that you can't answer, you get a hold of us and we can give you those answers. I think that helps. But I totally see your point, and we certainly do not want to come across as stifling or limiting public comment at this time. I totally get that. I just think this creates more focused and an opportunity for us to actually dialogue with people. If somebody were to come in and ask a question about a specific agenda item, there could be avenues for us when we get to those agenda items to clear up those questions. It's just more focused, and to me, I think it just enhances our communication. But it's ultimately the pleasure of the board.
Thank you. I think one of the things, Dr. Hawker, that we've all indicated at different times is when we set maybe our calendar for next year, what are those other public forums that we're at, maybe to be able to answer questions in more of a dialogue format. So if we'll just continue to keep that on our radar, especially. So
Just to speak to the dialogue part of it too, I've spoken with you, Dr. Hawker, a couple times about this in the past, but of course we can't dialogue with them here, but it does say in the public comment guidelines that instead issues may be recorded and referred to the proper staff member for follow-up. And I don't know that that's being done, and maybe that would help to be able to open that door to dialogue and continue that process after the meetings are done and throughout the week following.
Yeah, Chair Smith and trustees, I think we do our best at that. You've seen probably the public comment sign-up forms. Oftentimes, we might get a name that we can barely pronounce or barely spell out, and there's no other details. There's no email. I don't have a way to chase them down to know how to get in touch with them. So that is part of the challenge too. So maybe we can be more specific on the forms as well, and maybe we're not going to call somebody up if they don't fill out the whole form correctly, or some of those kinds of things. Because you're right, Trustee Anderson. We want to be able to communicate with people that ask questions. That's exactly what we want it to do.
I think that might be
intriguing.
Great, to update that form. There was a few months ago, someone made a comment. I think it was directed at me, but they made a comment that I wanted to address. And I looked at the form and I tried to figure out who they were. I tried to Facebook stalk them and do all those sorts of things to figure out who they were, and I couldn't. They weren't in our system. I think I had Dr. Hawker look. They weren't apparent that we could tell. And I was never able to communicate with them. And they didn't have contact
I
information.
think that's
there,
an
so.
easy fix. Maybe say that we would like an email, or if some people aren't comfortable with giving their phone numbers, but something so that we could address your concerns. But I think if we didn't change it, but also encouraged, like you said, the emails, coffee, I mean, all of us are more than willing to do that, have our treats with trustees or whatever we want to call those, then eventually more people would probably access us that way. But I don't think changing it right now is a good idea. But we could work towards that, creating all those great avenues to enhance communication.
Are we willing to go as far as to say if people don't leave a way to communicate back that?
Well, we won't be able to communicate back.
Right.
Can't communicate back if we don't have some.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Like an
So
email
if
or
that
a phone
form
call or
doesn't have something, then
we wouldn't be able to answer.
but are we not letting them speak then or not? So if someone comes in and just leaves their name, which is often what happens, that would be the next step of consideration there.
Maybe we could move towards that, but I wouldn't do that right away. But let's encourage people to make sure that they leave an avenue so that we can address their concerns in addition to maybe what they're speaking about.
Yeah, I would lean away from wanting to not have their comments heard if they don't leave contact information, but to definitely each time, even on the form, encourage, we will not be able to contact you or address your concerns without your contact information.
The concern sometimes for me is those that maybe live far outside of our district and are commenting on pieces that are district related. That's where I get hung up on that public comment sometimes, because that does happen. But
Is that the majority of? I don't think that's probably the majority. I think that might happen, but it's not the majority of what
I don't want to limit it to people that are outside, if there's someone from Post Falls or something that wants to come and talk, but I do think it's nice if they've indicated that and haven't skipped over that part. Trustee Tenbrook, you were going to say something.
Oh, I was going to ask, do we have a person kind of talking people through signing up for public comment, or is it just a form? I mean, I guess I'm saying maybe if we had a person a person encouraging
They're all back there touching their nose. Not it.
Well, just if we had someone who talked to people and they signed up for public comment and, was like, we can't really address your concern unless we have some contact information, like that.
All right. Well, let's work towards updating that form and and changing it. Is that enough information to begin to update that and maybe some language on there?
So maybe it's name, city of residence, and email, or phone number, or whatever, either one. Right.
And then maybe
We just need a big alert in red or something on the form that really we need to say something like, this form is required to be filled out in its entirety, or I don't know. I mean, because again, what you get is,
I think it says subject on there too, actually.
yeah, and
Is
it usually
yeah.
says subject, but they traditionally there's a lot that don't say anything but their name, and they don't put their address.
name
There's
and
no
subject.
communication, right?
Another thing I think is, like, we would all like to have more of these, like, treat with trustees or whatever forum events. I think it could be helpful if we went ahead and scheduled those so that people knew when the next one was, rather than, at this point, we don't have any on the books. So.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely
we'll work.
agree with that, for sure.
Right. I think when we're doing some of our retreat work, that we've taken some polls, I know, to try and figure out schedule-wise and stuff. I think that's probably part of that as we look ahead to next year, really, and what that looks like. So, okay.
Just interesting here, looking at the policy for written materials, it does require name, address, telephone number. I don't think we actually require the address, but according to the policy, the procedure, they're supposed to, right?
I mean, usually
But it's name and email, right? Yeah.
that's usually what people leave.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. We've got a couple. Go
Do
ahead.
we need to vote to table that? If that, I mean, that's kind of what I heard from 3 people, so do you want to do that?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Or approve it, your choice.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to table
4105.
4105, or, yeah,
P.
public participation in board meetings.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
And that's
I need.
4 to table and 1 nay. Four to table. All right, we've got a couple future dates. June 26th is our special board meeting and budget adoption right here. And July 10th then is our next regular board meeting. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then when we come back, we'll move into executive session. So we'll go ahead and clear the room.
Want to do the motion now so we can clear the room?
Sure. Is there a motion then to move into executive session per Idaho Code 74-2061B to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent or public school student? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Oh.
Go ahead. Take your pick.
Taking that one, Heather?
Sure, she can have it.
Roll call.
Okay, roll call, trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Morrisroe?
Yes.
Trustee Beard? Yes. Trustee Tenbrink?
Yes.
Trustee Gann?
Yes.
Terrific. Thank you, everyone.
The 26 is only the budget hearing?